This is ConPhilArts, Lesson 2, History of Philippine Art. Now, from the previous lesson, we learned that the contemporary can be situated in art, historical, stylistic, and cultural terms. This lesson will provide a more detailed discussion of Philippine art history and its major periods, artists, and their works. While we recall the past in this lesson, it is also important to remember that the art of the so called past continued and continues to evolve until the present, and are therefore, in that sense, contemporary. This art continues to be produced even if the conditions behind its production have already changed significantly. In art historical terms, we refer to art before the coming of the first colonizers as pre-conquest. In stylistic terms, we refer to it as indigenous to emphasize the idea that our ancestors have been making art even before colonization. It is also described in cultural terms as pre-colonial, as a term to use for the general way of life before colonization. Although the terms are interchangeable, it is also useful to keep these distinctions in mind when studying the art of the past. So, in our following discussions, we will answer the question, was there art before colonization? Of course, the answer is yes. Okay. And in the following slides, I will show you arts, no, the arts before we were colonized. The arts before we were colonized are everyday expressions and were all integrated within rituals. Example is the May Vanua in of Ivatans or in Batanes. It's a ritual that opens the fishing season of Dibang, or in English, flying fish. So earliest forms of theater or rituals, no, are artistic, and usually it has something to do with their traditions. So prior to colonization, art of the ancient Filipinos were woven into the fabric of everyday life. They do not refer to art as we do today. That is, as an expression of an individual and seen largely in museums and concrete halls. They did not distinguish forms into different categories like music, theater, visual arts, etc. Everyday expressions were all integrated within rituals that marked significant moments in a community's life, like planting and harvesting, rites of passage, funerary ceremonies, weddings, among others. Aside from the communal functionality of indigenous art, creative forms such as pottery, weaving, carving, metalwork, and jewelry also embody aesthetic, technological, and ritual values that exist in various forms with the present. So here is an example, no, of a ritual. Okay, pero syempre before, as I have mentioned, hindi yan kino-consider just like how we consider art, no, today. It's more of um yung functionality niya is for the community. Okay? So that's a dibang or a flying fish. In the previous picture that I showed you, ito yon yung flying fish or yung dibang, yan, dinadaing. Another example of a ritual is Kanyao or Kanyao in the Cordillera Administrative Region. It is officiated by a shaman or mombaki. It involves animal sacrifice where the entrails are read through a process of divination. So, Kanyao is usually performed either for healing, pagka merong may sakit, no, sa kanilang community, to announce the birth of a child, pag may ipapanganak, or a coming of age, birthday, during wakes, kapag may namatay, during weddings, pag may kakasal, and burial ceremonies. Kashawing of Lake Lanao of Mindanao is another example. So the picture here that you see um, above, okay, is kashawing. It's a ritual to ensure abundance during rice planting and harvesting. So may communal function, no, yung mga rituals, no, ng mga pre-colonial art. Tagbanwa, okay, the picture here below, okay, is another ritual, no, in Palawan. Shamans go into trance amidst ritual chanting and dancing and are believed to be taken over the goddesses themselves. From the examples of rituals that I have discussed, makikita natin na yung communal functionality, okay, ng mga rituals nila. As I have mentioned earlier, before, hindi nila 'to kino-consider as art forms. Pero tayo ngayon, since performative itong mga rituals nila, 'no, sa panahon natin ngayon sa kasalukuyan, kino-consider natin itong mga performances na 'to, or yung na performative art, 'no. When it comes to musical instruments, usually when they conduct rituals, it is accompanied by musical instruments. So here are some of the musical instruments that were used before colonization. So we have kudyapi, it's a three-stringed guitar, kulintang, an array of bossed gongs, and gansa, a flat gong, and agong, a large bossed gong. So here are illustrations or pictures of the musical instruments that I've mentioned. So dun sa rituals, kita natin, no, they imitated, no, the movements of animals. When they imitated the movements of animals that they hunt, this marked the early beginnings of theater or play acting. And when they learned to add drum beating, or drums, and attach a rhythm to their movements, they had given birth to music and dance. So yes, no, my art before colonization. Now let's discuss some of the native art forms before colonization period. There were also dance forms, okay, before colonization. One example is Pangalay of Sulu. It's a mimetic dance of seabirds. Itong picture na nasa taas. Okay. Also, Kinabwa of Mandaya, okay, performs swooping movements imitating the movements of eagle. Ito namang picture na nakikita niyo sa baba. Another native dance form before colonization is the banog-banog of the Hinigawnon and Bilaan. And this picture below, ayan, and that's a native dance form. It's a courtship dance that portrays the flight of the birds. This picture above, okay, is Man-Manok of the Bago tribe. It's a dance that dramatizes three roosters who compete against one another to be able to get the attention of a hen, Lady Lien. Okay. Another native dance form, no, during pre-colonial period is the talip of Ifugaos. It's a courtship dance mimetic of the movement of the wild fowls. Itong picture na to na nakikita nyo sa kaliwa. Okay. Ito namang nasa kanan is another native dance form, which is Inamong of the Matigsalugs and Kadaliwas, no, ng mga Tiboli, which represents the comedic movements of monkey. If you want to see the performances, no, of these native dance forms, you can go to YouTube, so you can watch the performance. And of course, tinikling of the Tagalogs. Evocative of the movements of the crane, balancing o yung tikling, balancing itself on stilt-like legs or flitting away from the clutches of bamboo traps. I'm sure when you were in elementary or in high school, no, you've tried dancing tinikling in your MAPE subject. So mapapansin ninyo na these native art forms imitated the movement of animals and praise and the sounds that they made. Ginagaya nila, minimimic yung mga movements ng animals katulad ng seabirds, itong pangalay, yung kinabwa, yung eagle naman, no, ginagaya. Dito naman sa banog-banog, it's a courtship dance but it portrays the flight of the birds. Yung manmanok naman, manok. Yung talip, wild foals. And yung inamong, monkeys. And yung tinikling, yung mga tikling o yung crane. Diba? So ginagaya nila yung mga nakikita nila na animals that are of course found in their environment. So bakit nila ginagawa yan? Ginagaya nila yung mga movements ng animals. Our ancestors, just like all others in the world during those times, were hunter-gatherers. Before there were cities and large monuments, the pre-colonial Filipino hunted food and game that were shared among members of a community in a gathering where they told stories about the hunt. No? So, ito ay hindi lamang refleksyon ng culture na meron yung mga um, ninuno natin, kung hindi ito ay pagpapakita rin ng isang pamamaraan kung paano nakikipag-socialize, no, yung mga ninuno natin, no, during this period bago dumating yung mga Espanyol.